Learn how to use stencils in an unexpected way to create stained glass effects. Hi there, Sandy Huntress here, bringing you another project using supplies from the Create Along box. This time we're focusing on Mandala Madness. When you look at stencils, you might not immediately think stained glass, but if you just picture that the outline would be in black and the inside parts would be colors, especially translucent colors, well, there you have it. Now, you can use pretty much any of these stencils, any stencil that has large open spaces with fairly thin borders around it. You could also use this one, even though it has more black spaces around it. You could use this large one, and all of these come in the Mandala Madness box. What you'll first need to do is roll out some black clay to a fairly thin setting. This is a number 6 on my pasta machine, which is about 1 millimeter thick. You'll then need to roll out some translucent clay on the exact same setting. In order for this to work, it's important that all of your sheets of clay are done on the same thickness. What I have here is some translucent clay. I like Pardo, but you can use any translucent clay you have. And I just mixed in tiny dabs of clay colors. In this one, I mixed in some of the mica glitter powder that came in the Mandala Madness box as well, just to give it a little bit of a different effect. The next thing you'll need to do is start cutting out your shapes. So you'll have to decide what color you want each of the shapes to be. You want to stick your clay down, just burnish it down lightly to a tile, just so that it sticks. Get yourself a nice sharp craft knife. I'll angle this. And just go ahead and start cutting carefully. In order to not cut into your stencil, when you're cutting these, when you angle your blade, put it right up against that plastic edge and then turn it just the slightest amount. Can you see that? Just the tiniest amount away from that edge of plastic. And that will hopefully keep you from shaving off bits of your plastic stencil. So from each color, just cut out the pieces you want. Maybe you want all these flower petals to be one color, and all these outer ones, and all these little arrow shapes to be another color, the center. Just choose the colors that you want for each one and cut them out, leaving them stuck to the tile for the moment. The next thing you'll want to do is place the same stencil on your black clay. Burnish that down well, and then this one you can cut out all of those shapes the exact same way. Stick it, make sure it's stuck down. It's much easier to cut accurately. Cut them all out the exact same way, except for the black outline. Right now, while you're doing this, you can lift out those pieces, and if there's little crumbs, you can just use your blade to clean it up. And repeat to cut out all of these pieces. Now for this one, we're pulling these out so we don't have to be quite so neat, but for the other one, you do kind of want to cut a little bit more carefully and accurately the first time. Although we will be burnishing this in, it's better to not have as many mistakes to correct. Here's a tip for you. Once you're done cutting out your stencil, cut a little bit outside of that line for your circle. I did that mostly because the cutter that I have that is that size and shape, I just needed a little bit more to cut off, and you'll see that in a bit. Also, take a minute and wipe down your stencil thoroughly and get the black clay off of it before you use it on your colored clay, depending on what order you do these in. So for the black, we're removing the cutouts. But for the colored pieces, of course, we're keeping the cutouts. So you'll want to use your blade and just release the excess clay from off the tile. As you're handling these, just handle them gently so that you distort the shapes as little as possible. Of course, the closer they are to the original cutout shape, the easier your job is going to be. But just because of the way we're doing this, if there's a little tiny bit of distortion, this technique will still work. Now you can use your clay blade to lift up your pieces and pop them in place inside the black outline. One reason we want our clay fairly thin is that it's much easier to fit these pieces in place if both sheets of clay are thin. If they're really thick, it just is more room for error. And you proceed just puzzle piecing in. This is kind of fun and satisfying. Things you can use to tint your translucent clay. You can just use a tiny dab, like less than half the size of a pea. Just a tiny smidge of other polymer clay. Or a little tiny bit. Actually, with all of these, it really is important that it's just a very small amount. Small amount of alcohol ink, even a little bit of acrylic paint, powders. Powders will very quickly make your clay less translucent, so keep that in mind. I had first thought to use the opal clay because I thought the reflective mylar flakes in there would be really pretty, and they would, but it's just too hard to cut that clay cleanly because basically opal clay is translucent clay with mylar flakes in it. And the mylar flakes just kind of make a mess. If you want to make several of these at once, just cut out all of the shapes from, like if you use 3 colors like I did, cut all of the shapes from each of the 3 colors and then cut out 3 of these black pieces, and then you'll have enough to fill them up. What's interesting is that you would expect all of these shapes to be exactly the same, but it must be just the way these are created. They actually are not. I especially noticed it in these outer ones, that there are some that are somewhat different, slightly different sizes and shapes. You don't really see it in the end, but when you're trying to puzzle fit a piece in, you might notice. Next, you'll just want to grab some paper. I like sheets of deli paper. You could use wax paper. You could use parchment paper. Even just plain typing paper, printer paper would be fine. I like the deli sheets because I can really see it. It's thin. I can feel through it. And then what you'll want to do is burnish. Now you can use your fingers. You could use an acrylic roller to rub. What I love to use is this. It's a cabinet knob that I got at Home Depot. And it's got these rounded edges. So you just hold it and you can really feel. You can probably sort of hear. It's a little like lumpy. And then you can just feel as it smooths out. You can also see through the paper once it's all smooth, because it'll all be evenly stuck to the paper. So just keep burnishing until it's all smooth. And because you're doing translucent clay on top of black clay, any imperfections are not visible because you don't see them. They're not visible. So there. Isn't that lovely? Now you could lay this on and use your knife to trim around it, but if you have a cutter that's the right size, then go ahead and put that in there. Push it down. Is that even? Give it a twist. And I actually baked mine just like that. Here's another one that I made earlier. You can see I didn't worry about removing the excess clay. I didn't want to distort anything. But I can just peel that up. If you need to, you can sand or trim those edges. I would recommend coating the whole thing, both sides, in some UV resin. That would make it shiny and really beautiful. You can punch a hole and make a sun catcher, or use it to decorate anything you like. So I hope you enjoyed this technique. Once again, this is Sandy Huntress for Create Along. Happy creating.